Picture this! You worked hard your whole life. You're finally ready to hang up that lab coat or step away from the manufacturing floor and finally retire. You're an avid golfer and you find that beautiful home with manicured fairways in your backyard. Pristine greens visible from your morning coffee spot. The American dream, right? Well, researchers from the Mayo Clinic and the Barrow Neurological Institute just published findings in the Journal of the American Medical Association Network Open in May 2025 that living near a golf course might come with an unexpected hazard. And I'm not talking about errant tee shots through your living room window. People living within 1 to 3 miles of a golf course have up to 126% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease compared to those living more than 6 miles away. Welcome to Apprentice.io's Industry Insights. I'm Frank Maggiore, and today we're tackling a story that hits close to home for anyone who's ever dreamed of retiring to that perfect house overlooking the 18th green. Now, before golf course developers start forming angry mobs with pitchforks and sand wedges, we need to talk about what this study actually shows, what it doesn't show, and why the story is way more complicated than golf courses cause Parkinson's. Because, spoiler alert, correlation is definitely not causation here, and the real story involves groundwater, pesticides, and some fascinating questions about who gets to live where. This story was recommended to me by my father, who was an excellent golfer for most of his life. I, on the other hand, have been told that I defy the laws of physics when I play golf, and not in a good way, as in, how could you possibly hit that shot and the ball goes backwards kind of way? If you have any stories you would be interested in me covering, let me know, and I'll add it to the list of potential topics for upcoming episodes. Before we dive into putting greens and pesticides, let's talk about Parkinson's disease itself. This is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder that affects roughly 10 million people worldwide and about 1.1 million cases in the United States alone. And those numbers are exploding. We're looking at an estimated 12 million cases globally by 2040. That's not just demographic aging, folks. Something is changing. Parkinson's attacks the dopamine-producing neurons in a part of the brain called the substantia nigra. When those neurons die off, you lose the chemical messenger that coordinates smooth, controlled movements. The result? The classic symptoms most people associate with the disease: tremors, rigid muscles, slowed movement, and balance problems that progressively worsen over time. Here's where it gets interesting for a manufacturing audience. Parkinson's doesn't happen overnight. The disease process actually begins in the brain 10 to 15 years before symptoms become noticeable enough for diagnosis. That's a long latency period. Think of it like a slow motion equipment failure where microscopic damage accumulates until you finally see the breakdown on the production line. By the time someone gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, they've typically already lost 60 to 80% of their dopamine neurons. The cause? That's been the million-dollar question. We know there's a genetic component. Certain gene variants increase your risk, but genetics alone don't explain the epidemic level of growth that we're seeing. Most experts now believe Parkinson's results from a complex interaction between genetic predisposition and environmental factors. And that's where pesticides, manufacturing facilities, and yes, golf courses enter the picture. All right, let's talk about what these researchers actually did, because the methodology here is pretty clever, even if it has some significant limitations. The team pulled data from the Rochester Epidemiology Project, which tracks medical records in Olmsted County, Minnesota, and parts of western Wisconsin. They identified 419 people who were diagnosed with incident Parkinson's disease between 1991 and 2015. That's newly diagnosed cases, not people who moved to the area already having the disease. These patients had a median age of 73 years, and about 61% were male, which tracks with the known gender distribution of Parkinson's. They then matched these cases with 5,113 control individuals without Parkinson's, matching by age and sex. The controls were similar in age, median 72 years, and also predominantly male, about 60%. Now here's where it gets methodologically interesting. The researchers didn't just measure straight line distance to golf courses. Like a Netflix crime drama episode, they went full forensic geography. They manually digitized the boundaries of 139 golf courses in the study area using satellite imagery from 2022. They looked at residential histories where people actually lived over time. They analyzed municipal water service areas and whether those areas shared water sources with golf courses. They even incorporated data from 711 municipal wells provided by the Minnesota Geospatial Information Office. But they didn't stop there. They layered in groundwater vulnerability mapping, identifying areas with coarse soils or shallow bedrock where pesticides could more easily leach into the water supply. They controlled for age, sex, race, ethnicity, median household income, urban versus rural classification, and healthcare utilization. The statistical analysis used something called cubic spline fitting to model the nonlinear relationship between distance from golf courses and Parkinson's risk. Basically, they wanted to see if the risk decreased gradually with distance or if there were specific danger zones. So what did they find? The headline number is striking. People living within 1 to 3 miles of a golf course had 126% higher odds of developing Parkinson's compared to those living more than 6 miles away. The highest risk zone was actually the 1 to 3 mile radius around the courses. But here's where it gets really interesting and complicated. The risk wasn't just about proximity. It was dramatically amplified by water source. People who got their drinking water from municipal systems that shared water service areas with golf courses had nearly double the odds of Parkinson's compared to those in groundwater areas without golf courses. And if you lived in what they call vulnerable groundwater regions, areas where pesticides can more easily seep through coarse soils or shallow bedrock with a golf course nearby, you had an 82% higher odds of Parkinson's compared to non-vulnerable areas, and 92% higher odds compared to people whose water service areas had no golf courses at all. Now, before we all start panicking or filing class action lawsuits, let's pump the brakes and talk about what this study does not show, and this is critical. First, this is a case-controlled study, not a randomized controlled trial. That means it is likely showing correlation and not causation. The researchers found an association between proximity to golf courses and Parkinson's risk, but they didn't prove that golf course pesticides cause the disease. Second, and this is huge, they didn't actually measure pesticides levels in anyone's blood, urine, or tissue. They didn't test the water supplies. They didn't document which specific pesticides were used on which courses or in what quantities. They made an educated inference based on geography and water systems, things that are then going to need to be followed up in future studies. Third, the residential history data had limitations. Not everyone in the study lived in the same place for their entire adult life. Some people may have moved near a golf course only a few years before diagnosis. But remember, Parkinson's starts 10 to 15 years before symptoms appear. So, if your disease process began while you were living somewhere else entirely, proximity to a golf course in your late 60s might be completely irrelevant. And here's the kicker that brings us back to our correlation versus causation issue. Who lives near golf courses? Generally speaking, people with higher incomes that play golf. People who can afford homes in desirable neighborhoods with nice views and recreational amenities. Also, people who do athletic activities on a regular basis. And you know what else correlates with higher income? Better healthcare access, more regular checkups, earlier diagnoses of disease, and, more critically, longer lifespans. Lower rates of death from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other conditions that often kill people before they reach the age where Parkinson's symptoms would appear. In other words, people who live near golf courses might show higher rates of Parkinson's not because of environmental toxicity, but because they live long enough to develop age-related neurodegenerative diseases rather than dying earlier from other causes. It's a classic case of what epidemiologists call competing risks. Notably, the study did control for median household income, but that's a pretty blunt instrument. It doesn't capture the full picture of lifetime health access, preventative care, or early life exposures that might influence Parkinson's risk decades later. Neurodegenerative diseases are the last major category of diseases where new treatments are desperately needed. For other disease areas like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancer, we have large treatment portfolios, a good understanding of mechanisms, and new treatments racing forward. we at least see the light to where we're headed and the paths for how to get there. For neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, we're still in the dark. We're getting better at treating the symptoms, but we're still only at the beginning of the journey, where we don't know how many of these underlying mechanisms are working. Are these diseases all linked to amyloid plaques, genetic factors, environmental factors, microplastics in the brain, our awful diets, a lifetime of stress and lack of sleep in the modern world, social isolation, our family structures where we need to stay engaged with friends and family as we continue to age? We're still just at the beginning of figuring it all out. As we continue to make progress in these other disease categories and live longer lives, the prevalence of neurodegenerative diseases is only going to continue to get worse and be more costly in terms of healthcare costs and burden on families. Now, does this mean that the pesticide hypothesis is wrong? Not necessarily. Previous research has definitely shown that certain pesticides, particularly paraquat and roatone, can cause Parkinson-like neurodegeneration in animal models. Golf courses in the United States use pesticides at rates up to 15 times higher than similar courses in Europe. There's biological plausibility here, but biological plausibility isn't proof, and similar to the Tylenol causing autism debate, association isn't causation. We need more research that actually measures exposure levels, follows people prospectively from before disease onset, and accounts for all the confounding variables that make epidemiology so challenging. Now let's shift gears and talk about how we get to treating a disease like Parkinson's at scale. That's only going to go through manufacturing. Because whether or not golf courses are contributing to Parkinson's cases, we've got 10 million people worldwide living with this disease right now, and the treatment pipeline is absolutely booming. The pharmaceutical manufacturing landscape for Parkinson's therapies has exploded in the past few years, and this is where cloud-based manufacturing execution system platforms become absolutely critical to success. As of early 2024, there were 136 active Phase 1 through Phase 3 clinical trials evaluating drug therapies for Parkinson's disease. About 56% are somatic treatments, medications that improve or reduce symptoms, while 44% are disease-modifying therapies aimed at slowing or stopping the progression by addressing the underlying biology. The gold standard for Parkinson's treatment remains Levodopa, which has been used since the 1960s. Levodopa converts to dopamine in the brain, temporarily replacing what patients have lost. The problem is that Levodopa has a short half-life in the bloodstream, only about 90 minutes to 2 hours. Patients typically start by taking it 3 times daily, but as the disease progresses and more dopamine neurons are lost, the duration of benefit from each dose gets shorter and shorter. This has led to incredible innovation in drug delivery systems. In 2024, the FDA approved Vyalev, a continuous subcutaneous infusion pump system that delivers levodopa and carbidopa continuously under the skin, similar to insulin pumps for diabetes patients. This provides roughly 3 additional hours of on-time, periods when symptoms are well controlled compared to oral medications. Another similar device, Onapgo, was approved in early 2025 and is expected to hit the market in the 4th quarter. There's also Crexont, approved in August 2024, which uses extended release beads manufactured to slowly release medication. The real innovation here is a mucoadhesive polymer that keeps the medication attached to the area in the small intestine, where it gets absorbed for a longer time. Remember, levodopa is only absorbed in the small bowel, and since it moves through quickly, there's limited absorption time with conventional formulations. Beyond levodopa, we've got the next generation of dopamine agonists like tavapadon, developed by Cerevel Therapeutics and recently acquired by AbbVie. This is a once-daily selective dopamine D1-D5 receptor partial agonist that completed Phase 3 trials with positive results and is expected to launch in 2025. And then there's the really cutting-edge stuff, GLP-1 receptor agonists like lixisenatide, which was originally developed for diabetes. A Phase 2 trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine in April 2024 showed that lixisenatide therapy resulted in less motor disability progression than placebo at 12 months. That's potentially disease-modifying, not just symptomatic relief. There's also alpha-synuclein targeting therapies, 9 trials as of 2024, mostly in phase 2, attempting to address the protein clumping that's thought to drive neurodegeneration. Gene therapies like AAV2, GDNF, are in early development, aiming to enable continuous localized production of therapeutic proteins within the brain. And stem cell therapies are advancing using dopamine-producing cells derived from a patient's own blood or skin cells. Now here's where cloud-based manufacturing execution systems come in. Manufacturing these therapies, particularly the advanced delivery systems, biologics, and cell therapies, requires absolutely pristine process control. We're talking about real-time monitoring of bioreactor conditions for cell-based therapies, precise control of particle size and polymer coating for extended-release formulations, sterile filling operations for infusion devices, cold chain management for biologics, as well as batch genealogy and full traceability for personalized therapies like stem cell treatments. Cloud-based manufacturing execution system platforms enable pharmaceutical manufacturers to scale these innovations from lab bench to commercial production while maintaining the quality, consistency, and regulatory compliance required for drugs that will be used by millions of Parkinson's patients worldwide. The platform provides real-time visibility across multi-site operations, predictive analytics to prevent deviations before they can occur, and the electronic batch records required by FDA 21 CFR Part 11. As we develop more complex therapies, personalized cell treatments, gene therapies, sophisticated drug devices, the manufacturing challenges will only increase. Cloud-based systems provide the flexibility to rapidly adapt processes, implement continuous improvement, and maintain compliance across global supply chains. So where does all this leave us, both in understanding environmental risks like the golf course connection and in treating the disease? On the environmental front, the golf course study is a valuable piece of the puzzle, but it's definitely not the final word. We need prospective studies that actually measure pesticide exposure. We need to compare groundwater testing results with health outcomes. We need to account for lifetime residential history and competing health risks. Importantly, we need to acknowledge that Parkinson's is almost certainly not caused by a single environmental factor. It's likely a constellation of exposures, agricultural pesticides, industrial solvents like trichloroethylene, air pollution, plus genetic susceptibility that combine to create the risk. Golf courses might be one contributor in certain communities, but they're probably not the whole story. What's encouraging is that awareness is growing. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is tracking 151 treatments and clinical testing for Parkinson's disease. Investment in disease-modifying therapies is accelerating. We're seeing innovative trial designs like multi-arm, multi-stage trials that can test multiple treatments simultaneously, dramatically speeding up the drug development pipeline. The Holy Grail remains a true disease-modifying therapy that can slow or stop progression, not just manage the symptoms. And we're getting closer. The lixisenatide results suggest we might be finally on the right track. If we can intervene early, maybe even in the pre-symptomatic phase when biomarkers show disease process beginning, but before motor symptoms appear, we might be able to preserve dopamine neurons before they're lost. Manufacturing capabilities are keeping pace with scientific innovation. The advances in biologics manufacturing, cell therapy production, and sophisticated drug delivery systems mean that once we identify truly disease-modifying treatments, we'll have the technical capability to manufacture them at scale. So what's the takeaway for our Industry Insights audience? First, if you live near a golf course, don't panic and put your house on the market tomorrow. This study shows correlation, not proven causation, and there are many confounding factors that could explain the association. That said, if you're on well water in an area with vulnerable groundwater, it's probably worth testing your water supply, not just for pesticides, but for all sorts of potential contaminants. Good information empowers good decisions. Second, for our pharmaceutical manufacturing professionals, recognize that we're in the midst of a Parkinson's treatment revolution. The drug pipeline is robust. Innovative therapies are advancing, and the manufacturing challenges are significant. Cloud-based manufacturing execution systems aren't just nice-to-have technology anymore. They're essential infrastructure for bringing complex therapies from concept to patient. Third, let's push for better research. We need actual exposure measurements, not just geographic proximity estimates. We need long-term prospective studies. And we need to fund both environmental epidemiology and treatment development because preventing disease and treating it are both critical goals. Finally, remember that science is a process, not a destination. One study on JAMA Network Open raises important questions, but it doesn't provide definitive answers. And that's okay. That's how science works. We ask questions, gather data, refine hypotheses, and slowly build our understanding. The golf course Parkinson's connection is a reminder that our environment, the chemicals we use, the water we drink, the air we breathe, has consequences we're only beginning to understand. Whether you're manufacturing pharmaceuticals to treat neurodegenerative diseases or simply try to understand health risks in your community, the principles are the same. Rigorous methodology, healthy skepticism, and commitment to following the evidence wherever it leads. In an industry where precision and compliance are paramount, Apprentice's Tempo platform offers a cutting-edge manufacturing execution system solution. It's cloud-based, mobile-first, operator-centric, with the most intuitive UI in the industry, making it perfect for today's dynamic pharmaceutical manufacturing environments and for the production of the world's most complex drug products. Whether you're working on groundbreaking cell and gene therapies, biologics, or small molecules, Tempo provides a fully validated MES system that's both powerful and easy to use. It streamlines your processes, ensures compliance, and adapts to your specific manufacturing needs. So get off of paper batch records and discover how Apprentice's Tempo Manufacturing Cloud can transform your operations by visiting us at apprentice.io. Attention industry professionals, revolutionize your manufacturing process with the Apprentice Tempo Manufacturing Cloud, a manufacturing execution system built to streamline your operations, boost efficiency, and ensure compliance all in one powerful platform. Experience the future of manufacturing with our free 30-day trial. Scan the QR code on your screen now to unlock a world of innovation. Don't just keep pace, set the tempo as an industry leader with Apprentice. That's all for Apprentice.io's Industry Insights. I'm Frank Maggiore. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications when new episodes drop. Please comment on if you have any additional topics you would like for me to cover in this space, and we'll see you next week for more Industry Insights.